In a courtroom twist no one saw coming, gospel music icon Lynda Randle left jaws on the floor, not because of her sentence, but because of her reaction to it. Moments after the judge delivered the final verdict, the beloved singer, known for her powerhouse voice and polished public image, visibly trembled before collapsing in front of stunned onlookers. Gasps echoed through the room as court officials rushed to her side, but it was the haunting silence that followed that left the biggest mark. What pushed her to the breaking point? And how did a figure once seen as untouchable wind up here? The moment the sentence was read aloud, you could feel the air get sucked right out of the courtroom. All eyes were on Lynda Randle, the same woman millions have watched sing God on the Mountain with a smile so steady it could calm a storm, now frozen, her face pale, her chest heaving with shallow, panicked breaths. Seconds later, in a moment that felt like it belonged in a movie, she staggered, clutched the edge of the defense table, and collapsed to the floor. Audible gasps erupted from the courtroom gallery, with someone reportedly screaming, "Call someone," as officers and medics scrambled forward. It wasn't just the collapse that shook everyone, it was who had collapsed. Lynda Randle has long been the epitome of gospel elegance, the type of star whose public image was nearly unshakable. All grace, no scandal. Her fall wasn't just physical, it was symbolic. A woman who built a career on unwavering faith and a poised public demeanor had just unraveled in front of cameras, court officials, and a stunned public. Eyewitnesses described the scene as unreal, with one courtroom observer saying it was like watching someone's soul leave their body. Another, who claimed to be a longtime fan, said through tears, "I've seen her sing through sorrow, funerals, pain, but I've never seen her break like that." Something inside her shattered. As paramedics attended to Randle, shielding her from cameras and guiding her into a side room, speculation started instantly. Was she ill? Was this staged? Or had the weight of the sentence finally broken someone who'd spent decades carrying more than we ever knew? The real question lingered like thick fog. What exactly was said in that courtroom that made a gospel legend fall to her knees? And what does this mean for the legacy she leaves behind? To understand the full impact of what just unfolded in that courtroom, you have to understand who Lynda Randle was, not just as a gospel singer, but as a symbol. For millions, she wasn't just a voice on a CD or a face on a Gaither Homecoming DVD. She was hope, wrapped in velvet tones and Sunday best grace. She came into people's homes not as a celebrity, but as comfort. Someone who didn't just sing about faith, but embodied it. Born in Washington, D.C., into a deeply religious family, Lynda carved out her place in gospel music not by mimicking others, but by standing apart. Her voice, smoky, rich, deeply emotional, was unlike anything else in the genre at the time. And her presence? Unshakably calm. She wasn't flashy. She wasn't performative. She was authentic, approachable, safe. It's no exaggeration to say she became a spiritual balm for the bruised and broken. Her big break came when she joined the Gaither Homecoming family, a gospel powerhouse that introduced her to a global audience. From there, she headlined her own tours, sold out churches across America, and even earned an audience with presidents and religious leaders. Whether she was on stage or in an interview, her tone never changed: humility, dignity, and unwavering trust in God. And for over 2 decades, there wasn't a single whiff of scandal. No tabloid rumors, no drama, no messy headlines. In an industry riddled with public meltdowns and behind-the-scenes betrayals, Lynda Randle stood like a lighthouse. Fans felt they knew her, trusted her. She was, for many, the proof that fame and integrity could coexist. So when news broke that she was facing legal trouble, it wasn't just shocking, it felt impossible. Was it a mistake? A misunderstanding? Was someone trying to take her down? Even after the charges surfaced, there was a large portion of the public that refused to believe it. Online fan forums flooded with messages like, "I won't believe it until I hear it from her mouth," and "She's being set up. I know it." Some pointed to her years of charitable work and the lives she'd changed as proof that she couldn't possibly be guilty. Others simply prayed. This is the weight Lynda Randle carried into that courtroom. Not just her own legacy, but the faith of people who had built part of theirs on her voice. And that's what made her collapse feel less like a single woman crumbling, and more like a pillar of gospel music and gospel culture, cracking right before our eyes. The courtroom collapse didn't come out of nowhere. It was the final, tragic crescendo of a storm that had been building quietly behind the scenes for nearly a year. While fans sang along to her worship albums and posted throwback clips of her Gaither performances, a very different story was playing out in hushed conversations, legal filings, and backroom negotiations, one Lynda Randle never wanted to go public. It all started, according to court documents, with a financial discrepancy, a flagged audit. At first, it barely made a ripple, a few internal questions within her nonprofit organization, which she'd founded over a decade ago to provide scholarships, fund inner-city outreach, and support single mothers. The organization, known for its transparency and integrity, had been a point of pride for Randle. It carried her name. Her face was literally on the brochures. But something didn't add up. A routine review uncovered irregular transfers and missing funds, tens of thousands of dollars in donor money that had quietly vanished. At first, her legal team claimed it was a clerical error, and Lynda herself reportedly told close friends she was shocked and embarrassed by the mistake, but fully confident it could be explained. And for a while, it looked like that explanation might stick. Until it didn't. In a twist that turned the case from uncomfortable to undeniable, prosecutors claimed they had documentation, emails, digital authorizations, and eyewitness testimony that linked the missing funds directly to Randle's personal accounts. Even worse, they alleged that some of the money was spent not on ministry or charity, but on personal luxury expenses, including spa retreats, first-class flights, and a controversial investment tied to a now-defunct wellness brand. That's when everything changed. The public didn't know it yet, but behind the scenes, things were unraveling. According to insiders, Lynda became withdrawn and visibly stressed, canceling appearances and postponing multiple live shows. Fans noticed. Rumors started quietly circulating in gospel circles and Facebook groups. She's not herself, some said. She hasn't posted anything in weeks. By the time the indictment came down, the story was no longer containable. Headlines exploded across faith-based and mainstream outlets alike. Gospel icon Lynda Randle under investigation for fraud. Her team initially denied all wrongdoing, calling it a smear campaign. But when the court set a trial date, silence fell. No news statements. No interviews. Just a sense of something sacred starting to fracture. During the pretrial hearings, Randle reportedly sat stone-faced, often alone, with only her sister or daughter occasionally at her side. Gone was the bright smile fans had come to expect, replaced with a kind of quiet, almost haunted expression. One court reporter described her as composed, but dimmed, like a candle still burning, but in the final inch of wax. Prosecutors, meanwhile, were unrelenting. They painted her as a woman who had weaponized her reputation to gain public trust, then betrayed it in secret. Her defense pushed back, arguing that she had delegated finances to a small, trusted team and had no knowledge of the mismanagement. But the evidence was piling up, and the media frenzy was growing louder by the day. What started as a few missing dollars had now become a full-blown scandal. And with cameras set to roll on sentencing day, everyone wanted to know the same thing. Would Lynda Randle be going to prison? The answer, and her reaction, would shock the entire gospel world. The courtroom was packed, not with the usual churn of lawyers, clerks, and reporters, but with fans, churchgoers, and even fellow gospel artists who had come not just to witness the sentencing, but to see for themselves what would become of a woman who once sang about mercy with tears in her eyes. The air felt heavy, charged. Even the judge, known for his stern composure, paused for a moment before reading the final ruling, glancing at Randle as if weighing something bigger than legal precedent, as if this wasn't just a case, but a reckoning. Lynda Randle sat at the defense table, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, lips pressed in a hard, pale line. Her hair was pulled back, her signature gold cross necklace tucked beneath a conservative black dress. There was no makeup, no showmanship. Just a woman waiting to hear how many years of her life would be taken from her. Then came the words, "Ms. Randle, this court hereby sentences you to 18 months in federal prison, followed by 2 years of supervised release." For a second, she didn't move, didn't flinch. It was as if her mind refused to let the sentence land. But as the judge continued, outlining the financial penalties, the restitution she would owe, and the official conviction of wire fraud, her body began to react before her face did. Her chest started to rise and fall more visibly. Her fingers trembled. She blinked rapidly, like someone trying to stay awake in a nightmare. Then came the moment no one in the courtroom, not even her harshest critics, was prepared for. A sharp gasp escaped her lips. Her chair screeched backward as she stumbled to her feet, reaching instinctively for the table, as though it might steady her. But there was no steadiness left. Her knees buckled. Her body crumpled. And before anyone could fully process what was happening, Lynda Randle, gospel royalty, pillar of faith, voice of comfort, collapsed onto the cold courtroom floor. Chaos erupted. Her daughter cried out from the gallery, rushing forward as marshals moved to intervene. Reporters dropped their pens. Even the judge leaned forward in visible concern. 2 court officers immediately knelt beside her, calling for medical assistance. "She's not responsive," one was overheard saying, as a court clerk handed over a bottle of water. EMTs arrived within minutes and began checking her pulse, lifting her eyelids, fanning her face. She eventually stirred, barely, whispering something unintelligible as tears streamed down her cheeks. And in that moment, the courtroom stopped being a legal arena and became something closer to a sanctuary desecrated. The collapse wasn't just physical. It was spiritual. For decades, Lynda Randle had been the woman others leaned on. Her voice had been the soundtrack of healing and faith for millions. Now here she was, utterly undone, body on the floor, legacy hanging in limbo. After nearly 15 minutes of medical evaluation, she was helped into a wheelchair and escorted out through a private exit, shielded by court officers and flanked by her legal team. No words, no comments, just silence, broken only by muffled sobs and camera shutters snapping through the hallway. The court was adjourned shortly after, but no one was really listening by then. Because what stayed with everyone long after the sentence, long after the paperwork, long after the headlines, was that image. Lynda Randle, collapsed and broken, a woman once seen as untouchable, now brought lower than anyone ever imagined. And outside, the world was already asking, was it justice? Or was it a tragedy? By the time Lynda Randle was wheeled out of that courtroom, the world outside had already changed. Within minutes, the footage, grainy, shaky, captured by someone in the hallway, hit social media. Her collapse, her limp frame, the frantic rush of court officials trying to shield her from view. No one waited for context. No one waited for nuance. The image went viral before she could even regain her footing. #PrayForLynda trended globally within hours. Supporters flooded platforms with messages of heartbreak and confusion. "She's still my sister in Christ," wrote one fan. "I don't care what she did. That woman's music carried me through cancer." Another added, "She's not just a gospel singer. She's family to so many of us." But the empathy wasn't universal. The backlash was swift and sharp, especially from watchdog groups and those in the faith community who had long demanded more accountability from religious celebrities. "When leaders fall, the people bleed," one viral post read. "If she stole from the vulnerable, her tears don't move me." Others questioned whether the collapse was genuine or theatrical. "Convenient timing," one critic wrote. "When it was time to sing on stage, she stood tall. Now it's time to face consequences, and suddenly she faints." Even among fellow gospel artists, there was tension. A few publicly offered prayers. One well-known Southern gospel vocalist posted a black and white photo of Lynda with a caption that simply read, "God's not done with you yet." But others remained silent, either out of shock or fear of public association. Behind the scenes, sources say several artists pulled out of joint concerts and brand collaborations, unsure how close their names could afford to be to hers. Meanwhile, her team released a brief, emotionally neutral statement. Ms. Randle experienced a medical episode during sentencing. She is currently receiving care and will respond when able. We thank the public for their concern and prayers. But the silence that followed spoke volumes. Her website quietly disabled the donation portal for her nonprofit. Her upcoming fall tour was put on indefinite hold, with ticket providers citing unforeseen legal complications. Longtime sponsors, particularly in the faith-based publishing and event space, began distancing themselves, either pulling her materials or slapping them with internal review tags. And then there was the church. Not a specific one, but the broader body. In many ways, this is where the deepest rupture occurred. Lynda Randle had been more than a singer. She was a symbol, a beacon of Black womanhood in predominantly white gospel spaces. A soft-spoken leader who never preached from a pulpit, but carried spiritual authority in every word she sang. Her fall wasn't just a personal failing. It was a crisis of identity for many who had looked to her as proof that fame and faith could coexist without compromise. In closed-door meetings, several major Christian networks debated how to handle her past performances. Should they be pulled? Should they be aired with disclaimers? Or was grace still part of the equation? It's worth noting that not everyone turned their back. At a small revival service in Georgia, a pastor mentioned her collapse by name, saying, "You can't fall from grace unless you were standing in it. And grace doesn't vanish just because we do." That clip went viral too. And that's the paradox. While her reputation was fracturing in the press, in private, in prayer circles, small churches, and grief-filled family rooms, Lynda Randle's songs were still being played, still comforting, still reminding people of a God who stays, even when we don't. But as the dust settles, one thing is becoming clear. Lynda's story is no longer hers alone. It now belongs to her fans, her critics, her church, and an entire industry asking itself hard questions. Can you separate the message from the messenger? Is redemption still possible in the age of public accountability? And most importantly, what happens next? Because love her or condemn her, everyone wants to know. Will Lynda Randle speak? And if she does, will anyone still be listening? Lynda Randle's courtroom collapse may have marked the end of a trial, but it opened a much larger reckoning. One that's now rippling across the gospel world like aftershocks from a spiritual earthquake. Because this wasn't just about embezzlement, or fraud, or one fallen singer. This was about trust, about how we, as a culture, elevate certain figures in the church and entertainment world to a place where their image becomes inseparable from our own sense of faith, identity, and belonging. And when someone like Lynda falls, someone who represented humility, modesty, and moral clarity, the impact isn't just personal, it's institutional. Within days of the sentencing, major faith-based organizations began quietly reviewing their financial structures and internal oversight protocols. Industry insiders say several Southern gospel ministries held emergency board meetings, asking the uncomfortable question, if it could happen to Lynda, could it happen to us? It's not the first time gospel music has faced scandal, but this one felt different. Lynda wasn't a showy televangelist or a controversial prosperity preacher. She wasn't flashy or polarizing. She was safe. She was the artist churches invited for anniversary Sundays, women's retreats, and prayer breakfasts. She sang in denim skirts and cardigans. She signed Bibles. She quoted scripture like breath. And maybe that's part of the problem. Because in our hunger for purity, we often ignore the quiet warning signs of pressure, burnout, and unchecked power. Lynda wasn't just an artist. She was a brand, a nonprofit, a speaker, a spiritual figurehead. That kind of elevation can be intoxicating and isolating. According to one former gospel tour manager, there's this culture of silence. Once someone's seen as anointed, no one around them wants to ask hard questions. But now the questions are unavoidable. What structures are in place to protect donors and fans from financial abuse? How do we support artists spiritually and mentally when they're seen as public property? What do we do with art created by people who later fail us? And most urgently, can you fall from grace and still be welcomed back? The gospel community is uniquely positioned to wrestle with that question. After all, its foundation is built on redemption, mercy, and second chances. The songs Lynda Randle sang, God on the Mountain, I'm Free, Sheltered in the Arms of God, are rooted in the idea that failure is never final. But in the age of social media, where public memory is short but public judgment is eternal, grace isn't just theological, it's strategic. Platforms, ticket sales, and reputations can vanish overnight. So, while some fans argue that she deserves forgiveness, others are asking, at what cost? What does it say to survivors of financial exploitation or donors who trusted her vision? Even artists outside the gospel bubble are weighing in. A few mainstream Christian influencers have pointed out the pattern. We glorify leaders too quickly, elevate them without accountability, and then we act shocked when they fall. One viral post read, "This isn't a Lynda problem. This is a platform problem." Meanwhile, her discography remains available. Her songs are still being played. Streams have spiked, partially out of curiosity, partially out of mourning. And that raises another question. What happens when the most powerful part of your legacy lives on without you? Will Lynda Randle ever return to the stage? Will churches invite her back? Will fans forgive her? Or will they move on, choosing new voices to carry the songs that once belonged to her alone? The gospel world now finds itself at a crossroads. Does it double down on protecting its icons? Or does it finally reckon with the fragile system that allowed someone like Lynda to rise so high and fall so hard? And while her sentencing may be complete, the trial, the real one, in the court of public opinion, faith, and history, has only just begun. Now, with the verdict delivered, the sentence handed down, and the courtroom emptied, the gospel world is left with a question no one has a clear answer to. What happens to Lynda Randle now? For decades, she was the calm in the chaos, the voice that soothed grief, strengthened faith, and reminded believers that God is always in control. But now, she's the one left in the wilderness. Her name, once synonymous with integrity and grace, is now etched in controversy. Her ministry is paused, her public voice silenced, and her future? Completely unknown. There's been no statement from her personally since the sentencing. No apology, no explanation, no defiance, just a blank space where her voice used to be. And in that silence, a storm is brewing. Fans are divided, the church is conflicted, and the industry is watching, waiting to see what she'll do next. Will she appeal the sentence? Will she release a tell-all? Will she disappear from public life entirely, never to be seen again? Or will she, in the most unexpected twist of all, rise from the ashes, stand at the pulpit once more, and sing her way through the scandal? Stranger things have happened. After all, gospel history is full of comeback stories. The question is whether Lynda's is one of them, or whether her collapse in that courtroom was the final note in a song no one wanted to end. But one thing's for certain, the story isn't over. Not yet. Because redemption is messy. Reputation is fragile. And when a voice that once lifted millions falls silent, the world leans in, waiting to hear if it will sing again.